All right, we are back now here at the KFYR Plus News Desk. And as AI and automation reshape the job market, younger workers are looking for unions now to help advocate for their fair policy, address economic stability, and ensure career development opportunities alongside traditional concerns. Now, the latest research has found that 77% of workers aged 18 to 28 believe union workplaces are better than non union workplaces. That number blew my mind. It really did. Joining me right now is Scott Baradell, an expert on branding and trust. And full disclosure, he is also a spokesperson for MagnaCare, the company behind the survey. Welcome, Scott. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. So, what do you think is driving this increased support for unions among the younger workers?
Well, there are a few issues, but some of the most pressing ones are AI and automation and people being afraid about what that's going to do in terms of their opportunities to find jobs. And the other side of it are things like work-life balance. There are more concerns about just mental health and things that kind of those soft factors in terms of the workplace that maybe in the past weren't as much part of labor negotiations and things like that as they are now, based on the things that younger workers are wanting to be represented to do.
Yeah. So the LaborStrong survey found 77% of workers, again, aged 18 to 28, this is a number that really blew my mind, believe union workplaces are better. So what factors do you think contribute to this perception?
Well, in terms of perception, one of the interesting factors is that for the first time in a very long time, you've got both political parties, more or less, you could argue pro-union in different ways. The Republicans with their pro-tariff policies, Democrats have long been the party associated with siding with organized labor. And for a long time, it was just one party or the other. And then you had a period during that kind of globalization period under Clinton and beyond where unions had felt like they really had no one in Washington to
Hmm.
represent them, because that was when all the jobs are going overseas, and it's hard to unions to negotiate when they're negotiating against laborers overseas that are making pennies. And it's now finally there's this general belief among politicians in Washington that more needs to be done for workers in America. And I think that is related to the lack of an anti-union sentiment, that there always was this kind of anti-union voice that really isn't there anymore. So I think unions are really getting a chance to explain why they can help.
For decades, unions have been losing power, Scott, but Gen Z seems to be fueling that comeback in a different form. Can unions evolve fast enough to become the voice of this Gen Z that they're counting on?
I think so. I think we're already seeing signs of it. LaborStrong.live, that's the website, that produced this survey. It's a great information source for American workers, social media, and so with it that it's kind of very vibrant, and it's kind of showing the changing face of the labor movement. But to give you an idea of how labor is adapting, look at what happened with the Hollywood writer's strike. And you could say AI is unstoppable and there's nothing we can do and everyone's going to lose their jobs. But the truth is, the new contract the writers were able to secure bans studios from replacing them with AI, requires disclosure when AI is used. There are things you can do to protect workers amid all this change. You don't have to just say it's all inevitable and whatever happens to people happens to people. That's what unions are helping workers to say.
Can you elaborate on why younger workers believe unions should evolve their role beyond wages and benefits?
Well, I think, they're really giving unions a fresh look, and they're not uh, looking at unions in the same way that they maybe their grandfathers or
Mm.
parents or grandparents did. There was a long period of time, and if you look in this survey, what was really interesting is younger people are far more pro-union than older generations. I think we talked about some of the reasons why, but in giving unions a fresh look, they're coming with fresh needs. They're not
Hmm.
saying this is all about hard pay and benefit negotiations. There are other things that are important to us too now, and unions are increasingly realizing that, wait, we've got this real opportunity to have a kind of a renaissance in this country if we can connect with younger workers and what's important to them.
With over half of Gen Z workforce actively seeking out union workplaces, how do you see this trend impacting the future of unions?
Well, I think it's very positive in terms of unions once again having an opportunity to be a voice that's expanding,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even into parts of the country where unions have not been strong, because a lot of times unions were most powerful in places where the heavy industry was, those parts of the country. Increasingly, these are other types of jobs. You know, we're talking about Starbucks, we're talking about Amazon, we're talking about the kinds of jobs that affect people all across the country. And it's becoming less of a regional phenomenon where more and more people, wherever they're located, are saying, "Gosh, I need a voice. I need someone to help me, or help my compatriots and I to kind of get the rights we'd like as workers and to secure some of the benefits that are hard for me to secure as an individual."
Trust among unions peaks usually in the 30s and 40s. Then the 30 40 age group drops off for those over 60. Why? What factors do you think contribute to that decline in unions among the older workers?
Well, I think once you get into Gen X and the boomers, you know, they really came into their own in the workforce, say in the early 90s, and that's when you had, well, if you go back to the 80s, you had Ronald Reagan, a very popular president, was very anti-union. One of the first things he did was to fire all the air traffic controllers when they tried to go on strike. Then when Clinton came in, came NAFTA and all of these moves toward free trade, which was at the expense of unions because, as I mentioned, unions really couldn't protect their workers nearly as well when they're competing against workers overseas. And
Yeah.
so by the mid 90s, there was really not anyone advocating for unions, and so unions really seemed weak and unable to help workers. And I think that's the age range that's what they remember. That's what they associate with unions, and unions weren't able to provide much help at that time.
Yeah, not much of a sample size. What are some potential challenges that unions are facing as they adapt to these changing needs of the workforce?
Well, I think the challenges we're all facing as we think about things like AI and automation. It's not only that it's changing everything, but it's changing everything so quickly. And there's only there are uh, so many moving parts as it relates to things like tariffs as well. We know the tariff
Hmm.
policy has been kind of a moving target a little bit,
Yeah.
for example, but unions can only work within the realm of what's possible. And so, to the extent they can protect workers uh, from AI taking over more jobs than it needs to, or other things, to the extent there are jobs that are protected in terms of being able to pay people a living wage and still be able to be competitive as a business, that all of the variables that are impacting businesses today, it's very challenging to keep up with all that. So I would think, as a union or a union leader, understanding your negotiating position and your leverage in different negotiations can be challenging because it's the kind of thing that can change from day to day.
How do you think the current economic climate is influencing young workers now and their support for unions?
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty. Ever since COVID, um, you know, you've got you've had inflation, you've had unemployment, you've had underemployment, you've got companies that are leveraging the labor market being uncertain to say you have to come back to the office. This was after, during COVID, it was common to say you could work from home. Well, what if you've built your whole life around that and you've got kids to take care of and you can't afford daycare and all of these things? And suddenly there is a return to office mandate. These are all the kind of things where people can really feel helpless unless you've
Hmm.
got some support, or unless you're organizing with others who've had the same problems.
Uh, are there any specific industries where you've seen particular strong increase in union support among the younger workers? You mentioned the coffee place Starbucks. That's kind of where my head was right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's service industries. We've become overall, even though there's an attempt to bring manufacturing back to the US now,
Hmm.
we've gone from a manufacturing economy to a service economy. And whereas labor unions traditionally have been associated with manufacturing, you've got more and more service businesses that where people are starting to want to unionize. And as I said, that's not only something that's relatively new, but it's something that doesn't have isn't a regional thing. It's a national thing. And so younger workers all over are looking at this as an answer for the kind of service jobs they have.
Is there anything that surprised you about the LaborStrong survey? Any of the findings that you thought, like for me, the such a strong sentiment towards union for the youngsters, but anything that caught your eye?
Yeah, to me, it was not only that we've seen a steadily increasing sentiment in favor of unions among young people over the last 5 to 10 years, just gradually
Hmm.
increasing. And but what I thought most interesting was, as you mentioned, how that support and how that pro-union sentiment declines for older people, and it shows you
Hmm.
how important it is, the kind of the workforce that you grow up in, and what the kind of the messages that you were hearing and what the political parties were saying during those periods. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people developed anti-union sentiments in, say, the 70s and 80s and 90s, and those people who are older workers are fundamentally at a different place in their lives from people who are younger, who are feeling like they really need some support and some organization to be able to kind of build the life they want in the workplace.
How do you envision the role of unions going forward over the next, let's say, 10 years, Scott?
Well, over the next 10 years, presuming that you continue to have um, this kind of détente among the political parties as it relates to their position towards labor, and both in their ways working uh, to to partner with labor, I think you're going to see unions grow. I think you're going to see them grow, and you're going to see them grow nationally and grow into service sectors and new places where they haven't traditionally been as strong. Uh, the only thing that would, I think, change that is if one a political party decides to go an anti-union route. But it doesn't look like, if you're talking about a 10-year time frame, it doesn't look like that's going to happen because of the impact Donald Trump has had on the Republican Party. The Republicans were under Reagan, and they were the anti-union party,
Hmm.
and Trump is very much changed that orientation. And so, I'd be shocked if it didn't last a decade. I think we've got. I think unions are going to have a room to run here in terms of really trying to build something again, and to reinvent themselves, really, because it's not this is not on the waterfront, and those kind of that kind
Yeah.
of approach to you that you think of from the old days of what unions used to be. It's not the 1950s anymore. And so there's an opportunity, but it's incumbent upon unions to reinvent themselves for what younger people are looking for today, which is different.
Well, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think there'll be a resurgence in unions over the next 5 to 10 years. And if Mr. Trump gets what he wants, we've got all these jobs that are coming back to this country. You'll need, I guess, union support for many of those jobs. And it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Scott Baradell, thank you so much. I appreciate all of your insight on this very important subject.
Thanks for having me.